We're pleased to be joined today by General Carter Ham, the commander of U.S. Africa Command, via satellite from his headquarters. Oh, now he's back. From his headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany. General Ham assumed command of U.S. AFRICOM on the 9th of March. He is also, as you know, commanding U.S. military support for international enforcement of UN Security Council Resolution 1973 to protect the Libyan people. And with that, General, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks very much, Dave. I'd like to begin this today by expressing my heartfelt appreciation for the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen from our own nation, as well as many others, who have performed with such great skill, competence, and bravery since military operations began in Libya. And a special word, if I might, of thanks to their families, whose love and support gives every one of us who wears a uniform the strength to carry on. Over the past 24 hours, coalition forces have continued operations to implement the provisions of UN Security Council Resolution 1973. U.S. and British forces launched 12 Tomahawk land attack missiles targeting regime command and control facilities, a Scud surface-to-surface missile facility, and a re-attack of an air defense site which had previously been attacked. Coalition air forces from France, Spain, Italy, Denmark, and the United Kingdom flew missions to sustain the no-fly zone over Benghazi, to protect civilians from attack by regime ground forces, and to conduct further reconnaissance. Coalition naval vessels sustained their maritime patrols in support of the UN Security Council resolution direction to prevent the illegal shipments of arms to and from Libya. I assess that our actions to date are generally achieving the intended objectives. We have not observed Libyan military aircraft operating since the beginning of coalition military operations. Libyan naval vessels have returned to or have remained in port. Since the initial strikes, we have detected no emissions from regime long-range air defense radars. Air attacks have succeeded in stopping regime ground forces from advancing to Benghazi, and we are now seeing ground forces moving southward from Benghazi. We will, of course, watch these ground force movements closely. And through a variety of reports, we know that regime ground forces that were in the vicinity of Benghazi now possess little will or capability to resume offensive operations. I would note the commitment of all in the coalition to conduct our operations with precision, with very high concern for civilian casualties, and with positive control of all of our forces. Our actions today are focused on extending the no-fly zone southward, then westward from Benghazi. With the growing capabilities of the coalition, I anticipate the no-fly zone will soon extend to Brega, Misrata, and then to Tripoli. That's about 1,000 kilometers, so it's a pretty wide area. In addition to the forces I mentioned previously, we welcome Canadian and Belgian forces as they conduct operations today in the area. And I would note the presence of the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle and the Italian carrier Garibaldi add significant capability in the region. Finally, we are developing the process by which we will transition the lead for military operations to a designated headquarters. This is a very complex task under the best of conditions, so my goal is to not cause disruption to the ongoing operation while we effect the headquarters transition. I would now welcome your questions.
Bob?
General Ham, this is Bob Burns from AP. To what extent is the U.S. military communicating with rebel force leaders in order to coordinate action on the ground? You mentioned the Benghazi area and Misrata as well. And also, what do you know about the whereabouts of Gaddafi and the extent to which he's still in control of his forces?
I don't know much about the location of the Libyan leader, nor have we expended any military effort in that regard. We have expended considerable effort to degrade the Libyan regime's military command and control capability, and I think we've had some fairly significant effect in that regard. Our mandate, again, our mission is to protect civilians from attack by the regime ground forces. Our mission is not to support any opposition forces. So while we have reports from people who are reported to be in the opposition, there is no official communication or formal communication with those in this so-called opposition that are opposing the regime's ground forces.
General Tom Bowman with NPR. You talked about the no-fly zone moving toward Misrata. The reports today that Libyan soldiers are shooting civilians in Misrata. And I'm wondering, along those lines, do you fear mission creep here? UN resolutions specifies Benghazi, but might this move on to other cities as well? And also, as a ground guy like yourself, talk about the difficulty of protecting civilians by air when the Libyan troops are in among the population.
The first step toward countering the regime from attacking civilians, whether it's in Misrata or any place else, is to ensure that we have freedom of air movement. So the first step is necessarily ensuring that we are able to extend the no-fly zone and operate our aircraft with a low level of risk. So as we extend the no-fly zone westward, I think it is likely that we may encounter some of these regimes' mobile air defense systems, and where we encounter those, we will certainly attack them. The larger point of how do you apply air power, particularly in very close combat, is a very, very difficult situation for us. And the identification and the distinction of forces in very close quarters is a particular challenge for us. So we've been very precise in our instructions to the air crews about what they may and may not do, and we are very, very conscious obviously in limiting civilian casualties. So it is always this balance that we as commanders try to apply, and ultimately these very well-trained, very well-disciplined air crews, in this case from many nations, that apply when they have observation on regime ground forces attacking civilians. Where we can, and where we can safely without risk to other civilians and causing collateral damage, we have a capability to engage in those kinds of missions. Right now over Misrata, the first effort, though, is to establish the no-fly zone, and that process is underway. And until we do that, our ability to influence activities on the ground remains somewhat limited.
Mission creep, do you worry about that?
I'm sorry, could you say again, please?
Mission creep, do you worry about that?
No, I don't worry too much about mission creep. The military mission here is pretty clear. It's very clear, frankly, and what is expected of us to do, to establish this no-fly zone, to protect civilians, to cause to get the withdrawal of regime ground forces out of Benghazi. And so I don't have a sense at all that there is mission creep. What we are looking forward to is the transition from a U.S.-led effort to the designated headquarters. But again, I'm not concerned at this point about mission creep. I think our mission is clear, and we're moving forward. And as I say, I think we are so far achieving our military objectives consistent with our mission.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, General. Spencer Ackerman with Wired. As you go after the regime's ground forces, to what degree can it really be said that you're not providing close air support for the opposition, even if you're not in contact with them?
We do not provide close air support for the opposition forces. We protect civilians. Some, I suspect, some would argue that some within the opposition may be civilians. And if they are attacked by regime forces, then we would be obliged, if we possess the capability, to try to protect them from attack. But we have no mission and no intent to provide close air support to the opposition.
Can I just follow on that, General Ham? Elizabeth Buemiller from the New York Times. You said there was no official communication or formal communication with the rebels. Can you say there are no Americans on the ground, period, with the rebels, or on the ground, period, Americans of any kind?
It's been very clear to me, and I think anyone who has heard the President or the Secretary of Defense speak to this, no American boots on the ground. There are no American boots on the ground from this coalition. I think there are, frankly, I think there are some American citizens who were in Libya who chose not to leave, but no one who's a part of this coalition is on the ground. I don't know how to be more clear than that. No military boots on the ground.
General, hi, it's David.